end of the day, we love feedbacks. It's bread and butter for the meetup. So let's start with the technical terms we are going to use in this meetup, that is deployment. Okay. So deployment is basically a mechanism where we are making our applications, modules, or updates to available to the end users. So we are going to start from the planning and deploying it available to the user. So what is CI/CD? CI stands for the continuous integration, and CD can interpret for two meanings, that is continuous delivery and deployment. In the continuous integration, if we see here in this diagram, it starts from the planning. The moment the organization get the request to have something built, so it starts from there, and you start building and coding that code, and finally putting onto the testing part. Finally, it goes to the continuous delivery or deployment as the requirement you want. So it will be available to the end users, that is the clients. Now, next is, what is the difference between the continuous delivery and deployment? The most people get confused here. So if we see here, the major difference between these two is only one step. Both have the continuous integration the same way, that is building and testing. Everything is automated when we talk about the continuous integration and development. Okay, so the only point here which is difference is, if you see, if your organization have the requirement that you do not want your organization to deploy directly, that is automatically into the production, you want to have a manual intervention, then you can go with the continuous delivery. We call it as a continuous delivery. But if you want everything to be automated, even in the production environment, then we call it as a continuous deployment. The next is why the CI/CD is important, because at last what happens, we do not want any manual intervention because it could lead to major disadvantages and major causes. So if we see here in the continuous integration, delivery, and deployment, everything is automatic. We do not want to intervene until if we want for the production that we discussed in the previous slide. So the step build, test, and merge are the part of the continuous integration. Then automatically release to the repository is a part of the continuous delivery. Next, automatically deploy to the production. It is a part of the continuous deployment. Now I'd like to take over it by the Mayank.
Yeah, thank you, Mitali. Am I audible clearly?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Mitali, for the introduction. It gave a great start to our presentation. So just let me know, is my screen visible or not? Yeah, it's visible clearly.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And is the slide full screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So very good morning to all the attendees. So from here, I will be taking you towards the CI/CD deployment through Jenkins. So firstly, before starting with the demo and all the things, we should know about the terminologies and get familiar with this. So what is Jenkins? So Jenkins basically is an open source automation tool written in Java with plugins built for continuous integration purpose. Jenkins is used to build and test your software projects continuously, making it easier for the developers to integrate changes to the project and make it easier for the users to obtain a fresh build. Basically, the main advantage of Jenkins are like we have an open source tool which have a great community support. It is built on Java, so it support majorly all the technologies and all the basic platforms, and it have thousands of plugins based on each technology which you can easily import to the Jenkins and use it with your integration with your projects. So coming next, what is Jenkins pipeline? So Jenkins pipeline is a suite of plugins which supports implementation and integration continuous delivery pipelines into Jenkins. It provides an extensible set of tools for modeling simple to complex delivery pipelines as code. So basically, writing a pipeline as a code is the main feature what Jenkins provides us. And in Groovy script, we can define the whole pipeline very easily as a code. And it gives us a flexibility that in future we can edit it or add steps according to our requirements. So as you can see in the diagram, We have the checkout, we have the build step, then we have the testing stage, then we have a staging if any additional requirements are added, and then we go to the production. So this is the basic Jenkins pipeline what we follow. Going to the next, the declarative script. So basically in Jenkins, we use Groovy script. Groovy script, a different type of script, only applicable on Jenkins. So firstly, starting with the declarative script, we should know all the terminologies. So if you'll see the structure, we start with the pipeline. So a pipe inside a pipeline, we have agents. So basically agents define where the pipeline will execute in Jenkins environment. So for this pipeline, we have chose any. So any available agent at that time will be taken by Jenkins, and the Groovy script and the whole pipeline will execute on that. So agents we can define as a global parameter, what I have done before the stages, or for each stage you can define a individual agent which will specify and run those things. Next come the stages. So stages basically is a block in pipeline which execute a lot of basically specific tasks. And steps are the single task execute which directly executes the command. So if we'll go with the commands, then firstly, what we have done, we have defined a pipeline. Inside the tag, we have taken an agent, which is of any type. Then we have defined the stages inside which we have the first stage. The first stage refer to build. So what we have done, we have used the maven command for bat maven clean install, which basically install the package in a local repo, and to use, we can use it as a dependency. Then comes the test stage. So in the test stage, basically what it does, we have written test cases according to our projects. So basically it extracts them and run them during execution of the pipeline. The third stage is deploy. So deploy stage have this command, the maven package deploy, dmule deploy, which basically help us to deploy the our application to the required. Like we are using Mule, so we deploy it to Anypoint Studio, which is the cloud. So coming to next, the CI/CD deployment and the demo part. So before starting with that, there are few tools what we require for CI/CD pipeline. First is the Jenkins, what I explained. Then is the Git. So Git we will be using as a code repository. Then comes the Maven. So Maven we have a build tool which executes our pipeline steps, and Java back all those things. So we require these four to run this demonstration. So the next step is, if you are using a local system or you're doing in a local system, then before the steps, you have to define some parameters. So before the implementation, you have to step path for Java home, the Maven home, and the Git inside the system variables and the environment variables. But it's just specific to if you're using a local system. So next slide, let's start with the demo and like the steps for the demonstration. So firstly, what we'll do, we'll create a basic Mule application in Anypoint Studio. Then inside the POM file, we will add the deployment configuration, what I will explain you in the demonstration. The third step is like we will push our project jar or the project files to the repository. Then comes the fourth step, which will configure Jenkins with required credentials, which includes the build triggers, the repository URLs, the branches on which the pipeline will be built, and the script path. And according to the triggers what we have defined, the pipeline will execute automatically. Coming to the sixth step, what is Jenkins pipeline stage view? And it's defined that how the Jenkins pipeline looks. So I've added it, like you can see prior, that how a pipeline just look while execution in the stage view. And the seventh step, after like the pipeline executes and the project got deployed, so it runs on Anypoint platform runtime manager, and where we can see the deployed application easily. So now the demonstration part. We will continue with the demonstration part. So firstly, let's start with Anypoint Studio. So for saving time, I've made a basic application in Anypoint Studio, which starts with a listener. So basically, I've configured the HTTP listener to 8081 port, and I've added a basic URL like /demo for the path, and then we have set a payload, which like just displays a basic message. And I've also used a logger so that the same message could be logged into the console of Anypoint Studio. So the next step is we will add the configuration to the POM file. So talking about the pom.xml file. So basically pom.xml file is a unit, it's a fundamental unit of work in Maven. So if you're working with any Maven project, then we require the pom.xml. So in pom.xml, basically we define all the configuration files, the dependencies and all. So to view it in a better manner, I will show it here. So in the pom.xml file, we add this configuration. So basically the main motive of adding this configuration is when we deploy any application manually to Anypoint Studio, so we do it by going to the runtime manager and then to the deploy applications. So whenever we deploy any application, so firstly we have to add these credentials, which are like the application name, the deployment target, what we are choosing, the runtime version, what we are using of the mute, the worker size, the workers, and the properties and all. So to make it like to provide it in a pipeline, that's why we use and we put it in the Mule Maven plugin. So if you'll see in this one, it's better clear, the POM file. If we'll go to line 35 inside the Mule Maven plugin, then we there add a configuration tag. So in the configuration tag, what we are doing, firstly we are specifying like that the URI where we are deploying. So we are deploying it to Anypoint platform. So the URI we are specifying it here. Second comes the Mule version, what we are using for the project. So Mule version, what we are using, we can define it here. Then comes the username and password. So as we are deploying it to Anypoint platform, so we have the credentials, what we specify it here. We have the environment tag where we specify the environment. Is it a sandbox environment, dev environments, for example. Then we have the application name and the worker type, the vehicles what we are using to execute it, and the workers, number of workers what we are choosing. So all these file we put in the inside the Mule Maven plugin using the configuration tag. So after you set up, like I have set up it in there. So after you set up the configuration tag, we are good for the demonstration, and we are done with the like any point studio thing. So after that, you can save it and you can just execute the POM. The next step is we have to configure our Git repository. So if we'll go to Git repository, so I've made a basic Git repository named demo deploy. In demo deploy, what I've done, I basically put all the files what is concerning with our project, which is the Jenkins file, the mule artifact.json file, the pom.xml file, and the source file. So after creating a Git repository, you can easily get a URL of your Git repository from here. So this part is the second part what we are done with the Git part. Now comes the Jenkins part. So let's go to the Jenkins. So a Jenkins dashboard basically look like this. These are all the projects, all the pipelines what you execute, and these are all the dashboard and all the credentials. So firstly, before starting with the Jenkins, you have to configure many things. So going to manage Jenkins and going to the global tool configuration. Here you can add the JDK path, the Git path, and also the Maven path, what are installed in your local repository. And if you don't have, you can add through manage installations. So after this, we are good to start with the Jenkins demonstration. So if we'll start with Jenkins, if we'll go to new item, we have basically these all types of projects in Jenkins. So starting with the first one, we have the freestyle project. Freestyle project is a single unit of project which just demonstrate a single part of a like single, like if you're having a build step or deployment steps, a single step can be deployed in the freestyle project. And second is the pipeline project. So to save time, I have created a freestyle project for the demo purpose. So this is how it looks like. And if you'll go to configure part, then in the configure part, what we have, firstly, we'll start with, we have all the plugins that where we are putting the like project and all the things. If you have to specify, you can specify it here. Then we have the source code management. So in the source code management, you can specify that which repository you're using, where you are putting your uh, project files there. So I've used Git. So for this demonstration, I've used the security token. So this is my security token. If you don't want to use a security token, you can just put the Git repository URL here and add the credentials. So it will execute that. Coming to the next step, the branch to be built. So generally in a project, what we are doing, we have multiple branches. So for this demonstration, I'm using master branch to build it. Then we have the build triggers. So Jenkins have a very interesting part of this, the build triggers. So here we can use different type of triggers. So like if we'll, there are two main types what generally used in projects. One is the GitHub hook, another is the poll SEM. So GitHub hook is a webhook what we can define in GitHub, so that whenever a commit is done to the repository through new codes, then the pipeline will get triggered automatically and it will execute the file. And similar for poll SEM, it directly executes the things. So whenever a push is commit, the triggers start working and the pipeline gets executed. Then comes the build environment part. So what we can do in the build, we can define different steps. So for this demonstration, I have used the window batch command. So in the window batch command, I've added a simple pipeline. So if I will explain it as I explained it in there, it's a simple pipeline which have a agent which of type any. So any available agent can be used in here. And we have a basic step which is called the test step. And we have added mvn test, which is the maven test command for the things. So if you'll see, I have this project files here and I've just added the Git repository. So it will extract those files here and it will execute this pipeline on that files. So you have to apply it, you have to save it, and it will work. So if I'll go and just build now, click on the build now. So you can see the pipeline got started. So if we can see in the console output, yeah, so see the pipeline gets started and it got to the Git, it gets the files what we are searching for. It just triggered it. It took the all the maven commands. So the maven plugin is coming into play here. The maven plugin is executing the build steps what we are defined, and we got a build success. So the testing what we defined, it just compiled that and we got a success. So this is a basic project what we have done using the freestyle project what we have in Jenkins. So apart from freestyle project, we have a pipeline project. So I've also created a demo for the pipeline project. So in the pipeline project, what we have a similar configuration of build triggers and all. But
Hey, Mayank, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. There's a question. What is defined inside the Jenkins files in GIT repo?
yeah. So in the GitHub repo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I was just covering in that because that the Jenkins file we use in the basically the pipeline one, right? So I'm just
Okay.
explaining that.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Thanks.
yeah, sure. So whenever you use a pipeline, then we use a when then we use a Jenkins file, because whenever we are executing a pipeline, we are executing multiple steps. So we can't define it in a window batch command. It's not adversable. So what we do, we use a Jenkins file. So if I'll go to my GitHub and just show you the Jenkins file what I have added. So, like what we have done, we have just make a simple pipeline where we are using the config file provider plugin to get the credentials. And here we have added the build step. What we have done, as I showed you in the PPT, the stages what we have defined. So basic steps we have defined and the how the things will get executed. So rather than defining it directly in the Jenkins, we are putting it a external file so that whenever we want, we can change it easily. So coming to that, so is the question clear that why you use the Jenkins file?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so Jenkins, so we that's why we use a Jenkins file. So now what we can do, generally what happens, like when I showed you like we were having the configuration credentials, like what we put in the cloud up. So generally what happened, we don't directly pass it in the runtime or directly pass it in the codes, because the main problem is that if we'll pass directly in the codes, then we whenever we are changing the pipeline, we are altering any variables, we have to do it repeatedly and we have to redeploy our codes. So that what we do, we just externalize the credentials to a global level where we create a variables, and from there we can we can access it easily. And it's also applicable because sometimes it happens like a client specifies credentials to users, and there are a lot of person working on the same thing. So the client shouldn't have to tell everybody the same credentials, and they don't have to share it. So that's why, for the security reason and for the masking purpose, the client can define the credentials in a separate file, and everyone can use it using these basic syntax. So coming to the coming to the basically the demonstration part. So for externalizing credentials, we have two type of things. So in this demo, I will create firstly the config file provider, and second the Jenkins credentials. So if we'll go to manage Jenkins, then this is the tile for manage files. So config file provider is an external file plugin what you can add. So I've pre-installed it. So if I will search it, I will get this. So this is the config file provider plugin. You can easily download it. So after downloading it, the main purpose is like, if we'll go to manage Jenkins, then inside the config file provider, we can add a new configuration. So in config file provider, they provide a lot of formats where we can add the configurations. So it is like properties, JSON, Maven, a lot of things. So so if we'll put the next, then we'll go to this configuration file. So for this demonstration, I'm using a Groovy file. So if we'll go to the Groovy file and go next, then we will add a particular ID for this configuration, what we can use later on. We'll have a particular name for this file, and in the content we can specify that what are the things we have to put in. So if I want to show you, so see, um, yeah. So what we do basically in config file provider, we use variables like this. So variables should be in capital letters, and preceding the value should be in single quotes. So I have defined the environment, the name, the user and password for any point platform here. So you can basically define it here. So I have done it before hand to save the time. So I've just put in the Groovy file with this ID. So to access it, what we have to do in the pipeline only, we have to alter the things. So if we'll go to the pipeline, then what we are doing, a basic stage we are preparing, and in the stage what we are doing, we are using the keyword config file provider. Config file provider basically extract the config files what we have defined through the ID what we defined, what we get there, and also the target location. So as we have used Groovy file, we put it at the env.groovy, and we have a variable which is env because we are specifying the environment variables. Now what we can do, we use the syntax load env.groovy, which basically loads that configuration file. Now the second step is what? To access this, there are two methods. One, you can define the environments in the global level, or you can do it in a local level. So what I have done, I have defined the stage in a local level, and in the environments, what I have done, I have specified single variables which is specific to this pipeline, and there I have put these all variables. So you can just do it by dollar and curly braces, and inside you can specify these. So it will load the Groovy file, and it will read it and store it in this environment variables what we define. And to use it, what you have to do, like,
My
yeah,
just speaking, can you show the config file once?
yeah,
V config file, correct.
this one, right?
Yes. So
Yes.
this is a Ruby file which we have created. So you can utilize this particular file ID in your Jenkins file to explain. Okay. So, man, over
Yeah.
to you.
So using this same Jenkins file, what we used, we like here you can see we use this ID to extract those. And in the maven bat command, you can see using double ampersand and defining the variables what we have defined in the environments above, we can access it easily. So using that, we have defined it and we have put it in the basically the repository. So now if I will save this and I will go to the master branch. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So going to a freestyle project what I have created. So here what I've done, I've just configured the Jenkins file what we have added here, and it will automatically take it and execute all the things and also extract the credentials easily. So if I'll save it, apply it, and I will just go and build the process. So it started to build. Okay. So in the timeline why get deployed, it will take a time. We can see the next step, what we had there. So for the next thing, firstly, we use the config file provider, and next we can use the Jenkins credential also for the same purpose. So for using the Jenkins credential, what we have to do, we have to go to the dashboard, the same things. We have to go manage Jenkins, and inside manage Jenkins, we have to go to manage credentials. In manage credential, what you can do, you can go to just the global thing and add a credential. So the credentials basically here, what we are defining, it just ID and password, only two keys it takes. So we can just define the scope that it's a global scope that all the pipeline can access it, the username, the password, and the ID for this document, as we specified in the previous one. So if I will show you the pipeline for this one, then what we do basically, the pipeline is same for all the steps, but what we do in locally, we use the environment thing, and here inside a variable we use the credentials keyword, and 123 is the basically ID what we specified for that file. So it will extract those, save it in cred, and you can use the PSR and PSW, user and password. These are the basically tags what we use preceding with a like cred and underscore to access these variables directly. So
Mank, can you also show the worker vehicles and workers you are passing in this command argument?
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Actually, for the credentials file, what we are using, you can't specify the workers and vcores because it only take two arguments. So if when you are using only two arguments, like if I will show you in Jenkins. So if you are using only two arguments, then you can use this one, add credentials part. Okay. And if you have to specify the workers and all the things, then you should go with the config file provider. That's a better solution for this. Okay.
You must be having the in the argument list, right? In the end.
Yes, show the pipeline once,
Pipeline.
man.
Okay. So yeah. So in the pipeline, if you'll see the Jenkins pipeline, what we added. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have defined here the environment, the name, the
Line
user,
number
and the
20.
password. Okay. And
You
if
have
you'll
defined mule version as well, right? And you must be have defined workers type, right?
We could,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
For type. See the guys. So this is the micro is defined here,
yeah.
and number of workers is one also defined
Yeah.
in that.
So
In this.
everything like four arguments we are taking from the file, config file provider, the user, the password, and the environment, and also the app name. And apart from that, the vcos and the workers we are directly passing it because it's not a credential part, but you can also add it in that file, right? So this is the part. So if I'll go to what I was doing, okay. So this is how we access this. So to credential, we can pass it here and we can just add it in the build step. So that will execute it. Okay. And I think similarly to that pipeline, if you want to execute this pipeline, you can push it to the Git, and Git will just like use this Jenkins file and execute the whole thing. So till now, I think the Jenkins pipeline have been like what I have run. It might be, yeah. So it's just getting deployed. Okay. So if we'll see console, then it just read the whole pipeline, and yeah. So it just read the whole pipeline. It took the credentials, like you can see here. All the credentials are taking it from the file, and it's putting it here, and we are using the Maven plugin, what we are executing all the files, and it's just getting deployed. So if I will show you in Anypoint Studio in the runtime, so see our project name was democrat and it's just getting deployed. And as we have a previous version of this, so it is getting updated. Okay. And it's the date for today. So it takes a while. We can just wait. Till that time, anyone have any question regarding any step what I followed, then you can ask.
Anyone needs audio access to like share your query with the Mank, I will give you access. Please let me know in the chat.
Or they can put in the chat also. I can
Yeah.
answer it.
So I think Mitali and Rohit have answered most of the questions at this moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is one question
Yeah.
from Pandirajan. He's asking the credentials are stored as a plain text in the config file. So what is the standard way of storing the credentials based on the encryption?
Okay. So for
Whose
the
question is Amit?
Yeah, the question is the credentials are stored as a plain text, right, in the config file.
Right.
So the question is, what is the standard way of encrypting and how the encrypted credentials will be stored?
Okay. So actually we have two ways. Okay. So generally if we want to have our global variables, we go with the config file provider. Okay. So if you actually, so the Maya actually showed you two paths, right? One is a config file provider plugin and another one was the credentials one. Okay. So in the credentials, we generally go when we want to save at any point or any other platform where we want to deploy our application. Let's suppose in this case, we actually wanted to deploy our application onto the AnyPoint platform. So in the credentials, what he did, he actually stored the credentials for the AnyPoint platform over in the global credentials. If he showed, can you show that part?
yeah.
Yeah. So we generally follow that thing for that particular purpose. Although you can put it at various places, you can make a local variable or can directly define in your pipeline. But the best approach is always to put it here, because let's suppose I have an organization and I'm gonna give this access to all of you people, but I don't want you to go into the Jenkins and see the values of my AnyPoint credentials, because those are very important, right? So we generally use this global credentials because these are going to be secured. You can secure these. If you see here as well, the value is secured for the password. So this is the one way of securing your credentials, and you can use this credential file in your pipeline by using a keyword that is config. Can you show the pipeline for that once?
Yeah.
If you see, if you want to read this file, you can do this with the another one.
Okay. Another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
here we
this
can
is the
use the
credential.
credentials. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you will be creating the file over there, you will be getting an ID which will be unique for each one, and then you can read that. The second thing is the config file provider plugin. Can you show that, ma'am, in
Yeah.
the Jenkins? So another way is, earlier what we used to do for the each of the repos, we used to create the variables individually in the pipeline script. But let's suppose your application has been gone to the staging and you don't want to come back to your code and make the changes. This is the least thing anyone would suggest. So everything, every time, what we want everything to be available on the pipeline, and we don't want to go into the code. So to help this thing, because we are going to read the Jenkins file which is present in the code, and I don't want to touch the code, what we have done, so there is a file which you can publish on the Jenkins using this config file provider plugin, and you can create a groovy file. So you were asking that, right? We are writing the text one. That is not actually the text one. It is a groovy file. If you add a new configuration, you have different ways of writing. The one we use is the reusable groovy file. Okay, that is actually a simplest form, the forming of how we're seeing that. So if you click on that, just can you move that?
Yeah.
Hit a new groovy file,
Yeah.
and you here's a, if you see at the top, you have got a unique file ID for your file, and here in this here you can do various things according to your need. Even you can upload your settings.xml here. So 99.9% cases we actually use it for uploading your settings.xml here, so that we have the setup of the settings with our repository individually. Okay, just like we have in our local when we run. So this is the way we actually write a configuration file. Now, next move to the pipeline. If you see there, how are we going to actually load this file into the pipeline? We are using a term called as, in line number 23, config file provider. If you scroll to the right, you see what are we doing actually? We are telling them that there's a config file this with this particular file ID, which will be unique. And we are gonna load this file over to this location, that is environment.groovy. This is a file. And we are gonna create a variable env. So in the line number 24, if we go, we have written a command that is load environment.groovy. So what we have done, we have read this particular file with this particular ID, and load it over to this particular environment.groovy. Now in the line number 20, 30, okay, if you see, we are reading all those variables this way. So you can read all the variables which were defined over there directly because those are already loaded into your pipeline. If anyone has still questions, please put in the chat box. I can answer.
Yeah, so basically, this file, that configuration
Yes.
file that we talked about, will be maintained by the Jenkins admin. Like the users will not be having access to it, so that the credentials will remain secure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they were
absolutely, Amit.
Okay, I think Pandirajan, you got your question answered.
And just for simplicity, like we for the demonstration I was giving, that's why I use a Groovy file. You can use any type of properties or credentials file to use it, so it will be a more secure one. But using a Groovy script, what that you can easily see that what are the things we are configuration. Okay, so now like if we'll go back to the demonstration, then we can
Mayank,
see. Yeah,
sorry to interrupt you. Quick question. While deploying your application, we can see in the logs your new username, password. Still, everybody is able to see that.
yeah,
So, what are the practice we have to follow? Because
yeah,
obviously, all the developers have the access to see the Jenkins logs, right?
right. So
So we are gonna
yeah,
hmm,
so actually
And
for this
second question.
demonstration, yeah, yeah, go on, go on.
Yeah, that is the first question. Second one is in the Jenkins repository, is always a best practice to put Jenkins files, or we can have a sort of what do you say, one common place or repo where we can put the Jenkins file for all the branches. It should be with respect to each branch, or we can have a common place to this Jenkins files to place.
Yeah, so firstly answering the second one, what we did
Mhm.
in the repository, we put the Jenkins file. So it was for the master. What I'm using the branch is the master. So you can also have for separate branches the Jenkins file, or you can extract it from the master branch also while executing the things. So it's just depends upon your use case, that where you are externalizing and how many number of pipeline you're having. So you will have the certain number of Jenkins file, right? And
Yes,
answering the first one, in this demonstration we use the Groovy file. It's a plain test one, that's why you're able to see the things in the Jenkins log. But if you'll use a settings file or a different type of file, what we have, like in the credentials, we have a lot of files. If you'll see, we have global maven settings, properties file, which is a credential based one. So if you'll use this ones now, then it would be secure and you won't be see, it will get masked in the basically the logs. Okay,
perfect.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for the demonstration, for the ease of you all to understand, I just use that Groovy script. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
why I'm asking all these questions, because we are presenting our solutions, and like a few peoples are very new to through the Jenkins, and they are just started, right? And they
Yeah.
will follow the same that we are showing. So that's what it's good to have a explain the best practices as well along with that, because obviously in the industry we'll follow the best practices. It's good to
Absolutely.
have a demo. Yeah, it's good
Yeah.
to have a demo, but always we should tell them these we should follow our best practices, because uh, credentials are sensitive things to display.
Right.
right,
Absolutely. So
Yeah,
as we like showed you in the starting of the PPT, na, it's just based on a individual learning and what we are using. But all the things, all the pipeline or how we are executing, all the industry have a different standards, and according to their best practice, all the things will be implemented. Okay.
yeah, true,
So
true,
going back to the our demo part, if we'll open the pipeline, then the pipeline got executed successfully. So if you'll see in the console logs, we got the success. And if you'll go to the any point runtime, then you can see that this application got deployed on 16th on this. And this is the link for what you can access it. So this is how a pipeline get executed and how your project comes from the testing phase to build phase to the deployment phase. So this is the two ways what I covered, that how we can externalize the credentials and how we can make a pipeline in Jenkins and use it for the demonstration purpose. So that was for all my side. Thank you so much. And now Rohit will continue with the Azure development using CI/CD.
Thank you, ma'am. So let me share my screen. Mayank or Mitali, can you tell me? My screen is
Yes,
visible.
it's visible.
Okay, so from Jenkins to Azure DevOps. So I will try to keep Azure DevOps quite small, and I don't want to repeat the topics that is already covered in the theoretical perspective of Jenkins. So Azure pipelines, what is Azure DevOps? So Azure pipeline is a service that caters the need for creating pipeline on Azure cloud platform. It supports continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment. Hence, constantly and consistently test and builds your code and deploys it to any target by defining a pipeline. So even in the diagram, you can see the code that we have created on your Endpoint Studio. Then you are going to push to your remote repository. For example, here it is Azure Repos. Then you have built it. Now it is ready for the releases. So like for the deploy, for the testing, then for acceptance testing, and finally it is in the production. Now, what are the steps that you need to follow if you want to have a deployment with Azure? Firstly, you need to set up the Mule application. You need to create a simple project in your Anypoint Studio. Then you need to configure your pom.xml. You need to add the Cloud Hub configuration deployment in your Maven plugin. I will again show it in the demonstration. Then you need to push your project file to the Azure repository. Then you need to go to your Azure and you need to create the pipeline. So we will see how we can create the pipeline. You need to create your first pipeline. Then there are two options. You can also go with a classic editor or you can also go with a YAML. So if we are going with a classic editor to create a pipeline without YAML, then you are going to start with an empty job and then you are going to add the tasks that we are getting, Maven and the download secure file to your agent jobs. Then you are configuring your Maven plugin and the download secure file. Then in the download secure file, you need to browse your setting.xml and give the variable reference variable name to this setting.xml that you will use in the Maven. Then any variables that we are passing, for example, app name, environment, mule version, password, all these things we are keeping in the variables. But like password and the endpoint username that are quite sensitive, we need to mask it. So we are going to keep these two things in the variable groups. Then you are going to run the pipeline that you have created. Once the pipeline is created and completely successful, it would be notified that you are by the green tick, and you can see on the Anypoint platform that your application has been started. So let's move to the demonstration. So for example, I have created a simple POC where I have listener and the transform. Then in the pom.xml, I am adding this. So let's move to so that you can see. So in this plugin, Mule Maven plugin, after the extension, you need to add this configuration. You can easily find out this configuration even on the Google. Just type the configuration for the Cloud Hub deployment. As the Mayank explained that why we need to mention it. If you are going for the manual deployment, then you need to have username, passwords, environment, Mule version, everything. So here we are passing it. So at the runtime, we are going to dynamically pass this. Anypoint username, password, app name, all these things. Okay. So once you have configured your pom.xml and all your Maven dependency in this pom, then you are going to deploy your code to the Azure. So for example, I have created already a pipeline. So see, the code has been pushed to the repo. So if you want to create a pipeline, just what you need to do, click on create pipeline and new pipeline. Then if you are using classic editor for as a beginner, so you click on use classic editor, then Azure Repos Git, and then whatever the branch that you are going to follow, and then continue. Then you need to start with an empty job because you are not going with a YAML. Then you need to add the agents. To add the agents, you need to click on the plus add button, and then you need to search for Maven and add it. Then you need to search for download secure file and add it. Once both are added, then you need to configure both. So for example, for the download secure file, you need to browse the setting.xml. It would be in your M2 repository. Okay. So when you have browsed it, then you need to give the reference name also. So I have done all these things earlier in the pipeline. So let me show that only. For example, pipeline that I have created earlier for you. So see, for example, download secure file. I have browsed my setting.xml. Then in the output variable, I have give this variable reference name, and this variable reference dot secure file path I am going to reference in my maven pom.xml. See, variable reference dot secure file, because it is going to reference to your setting.xml. Then anypoint username. So in the maven part, you need to give the goal. What your goal? If my goal is package deploy, I have given it. Now what are the options? For example, username, password, app name, workers, mule version. Okay, now for all these things, the value that we need, like app name, mule version, I have created the variables. Okay, so see, app name, environment, vcore, workers, but you are not getting here my username and the password of the endpoint because it is quite sensitive. So I have created one variable group for this. So if you will see, I have created this password and the username, and it is masked, so you can't see it. So if you want to create any mask value or the confidential value, you need to click on the library, just click on the variable group and create your variable group. Click on add. For example, if you I want to give username, I will give username and the value, and I will mask it so that no one can see it. So for example, if I have created this, so for example here, so now I need to link my variable group. So I have already, if you will click on link variable group, so my variable group that I have created for the username and the password, it is already linked. Now going back to the triggers section, for example, if you are clicking enable continuous integration, means if you want everything automated, if anything is pushed to your Azure repo, that is continuous integration, then CI should start CD also. So it start whole pipeline, and the your application should deploy on your cloud hub. So if you want to do it, click on this button that enable continuous integration. If you don't want, then you need to manually run your pipeline. So for example, if I have run the pipeline, you can see. So before this 10 minutes, oh sorry, 13 minutes ago, I have already run this pipeline because pipeline takes time because it is going to download all the dependencies, everything. So for example, I have run this. Okay, so now agent job takes around 10 to 11 minutes. Okay, so even you can see in my Anypoint platform, my CI/CD, Azure CI/CD meter, it is deployed successfully and it is started. Now, if you want to go for another option, for example, if you don't want to go for like the classic editor, basically as a beginner, would like to go for it. For example, if you don't want to go for it, for example, if I am giving demo project name and just click on the pipelines, create pipeline. Now, where your code lies, whether it's on your Azure repo, BitBucket, GitHub, or any other Git. For example, I have already pushed my code to the GitHub, so I can directly connect my Azure to the GitHub. So for example, click on GitHub. I have already connected my GitHub account. So in this, you can see, I can find my repo. Now, in this, you need to have a Azure pipeline.yaml, this one. Okay, so in this, you have the trigger option. For example, if you want to have a automated pipeline that it should trigger whenever you push anything. But if you are giving part and exclude, if you want to exclude something, like if you want to exclude pom.xml, artifact.json, means if there is any change in the pom.xml or the artifact.json, and if you are pushing it to the GitHub, then your pipeline is not going to run. Then this is build variable group. Again, what you will do here, go to your library, click on variable group. You need to yes, so it would be setting.xml.secure file path, and it would value would be setting.xml. And if you want to have any username and the password, any sensitive information, you can mask it here also. Like if I am saving it, okay. So for example, in the pipeline, click pipeline. Yes. So it will take your setting.xml from the M2 repository, and it would be secure, download secure.xml. Okay, so even I have given here, so see, download secure file, all these things. Even this YAML you can easily find out on the Google. Just you need to do some modification according to your requirement. For example, if I have given this name in my variable group, so I am giving this name here. Next is the goals. What would be the goal? For example, clean install package deploy and all these things like environment, username, password. So for example, if you are not giving here, so you need to create variables. So you will create variables for this, like app name and what value. So you need to create the variables for everything that you are passing in the script. And if you want to pass like for the anypoint password and the username, you are going to create again variable group, because it is a sensitive information and it need to be masked. Okay, once it is done, you need to just click on run and it would run. So let's see the pipeline that I have created earlier, whether it's running or not. Firstly, so yes, it is running. So probably it will take around 10 minutes to get run. That's why before the starting of the Azure, I have already run this pipeline. And you can see before this, it was run successfully. And I have shown you that it is successfully deployed and running on your runtime manager. So that's it for the Azure DevOps. Now I would like to hand over to the Mitali for the BitBucket.
Thank you, Rohit, for such a nice explanation. Mayank, can you please share your screen?
Yeah, is it visible?
Yes. Okay, so the next and the last topic is the deployment with the BitBucket. As you have seen, the main concern remains same, that we have to create an application, then push it to a particular repository. In this case, we are gonna push our code to the BitBucket only. Now we will just see what are the changes we have to do. There's an analogy whenever we deploy the application. I guess you must have understood by the two we have done, okay, that we have to make the changes in our POM first and have the configurations of the Mule Maven plugin in the POM. Then the next, if you see, next slide, that we push the code over to the required repository, just like we are here using the BitBucket repository. Next, we have the different ways of adding the variables because we don't want it to enter our code again and again. So we always prefer to have it at the repository level or the pipeline where we are using. We will be seeing this in the demonstration. We can have different type of variables respective to each individual repository and respective to the workspace. Next. Now, when you see the Jenkins one, by default, when you saw that we were giving the path of the script as the Jenkins file, and it was going into the source code management, and it was looking for exactly the same file name, that is the Jenkins file. Now in the BitBucket, what it does, it actually looks for the file with this particular name, that is bitbucket-pipelines.yaml. So we will be defining our steps and the script here in this pipeline. Next, we will be executing our pipeline. We can also enable it to be whenever we push the changes, it will be get triggered. We will see how does it happen. Next step would be to see in the runtime manager if it got deployed properly or not. Let's move to the demonstration part. In the Anypoint Studio, if you see, we have a simple Mule application. And in the POM, and we have just pushed this code over to the BitBucket. Can you open the BitBucket? Yeah. So here the repository we have. I guess everyone is comfortable with creating the application and all that stuff. So finally, let's start with this part, the repository pushing. Here, if you see the pom.xml, what the changes we have done in the pom.xml, I have pasted in the notepad for the clear view. So just like the other part, in the 35 line, if you see that we want to deploy our application onto the Anypoint Cloud Hub. So that's why we have used this tag. But if you do with the another platforms, like you are deploying it onto the RTF, it would be different. But here we are to understand the analogy and what we have to do. It will be completely different according to your organizations and need. Here we are understanding how we can deploy it onto the Cloud Hub. So for that, we are going to use this particular tag, and all these things has been defined before as well. So we are defining the URI, where we want to deploy, and all the credentials, which we will be taking with the variables in the BitBucket. Just have a look on these variables. What are we naming? Line number 38, Mulesoft username, then Mulesoft password, environment, and the region, worker type, and workers. I hope please have a look over here so that we can use this in the later thing. Okay. Now let's move to the, let's see how are we going to set these variables in the BitBucket repository, okay? Repository settings, if we move to the repository settings of the each repository, we have the option to create the local and the global variables. First of all, we will create the global variables. Move to the repository variables. On the right-hand side, you will be seeing the workspace variable. Now let's understand this term first. So what does the workspace mean? Let's suppose in a particular workspace, you have three applications, your experience API, your process API, and your system API. Now there must be certain things which will be common to all of these. And I don't want to create the local variables for the individual repository. So I'm going to create the workspace variable. So what will happen in this particular workspace, whatever the repository there will be, and you want to run a pipeline, that will be reading from these variables if those will be used. So here, what I'm doing, I am using the username, region, work type, all the variables which I defined in the form, I am defining these variables. Also, if you do not want certain things to log in your console, you can secure them from here. There's a key lock button here, so you can click on that and edit that to be a secured part. Now, there must be some variables which will be respective to your particular repository. Like let's suppose from which branch and which environment you want to deploy. So we will see how we can create the local variables here. So we will again go to the repository settings, and there's a deployment thing. Understand and remember this term deployment here. I will be using this later on. Okay. So what we can do, we can create a different environment. If you see, let's suppose add an environment here. Okay, named as let's suppose testing. Okay, or QA, testing QA. Okay, this is the environment. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use this term and I'm going to define my variables here. So for the time being, I have created a local variable in the sandbox because I want to deploy in the sandbox. Can you move there? You can add your variables in here. Okay, you can just click on add and you can define your variables like Here I have defined one variable which I use in the POM, that is Mulesoft environment sandbox. Similarly, if there are another variables which you want to define at the local repository level, let's suppose the system API you want to deploy it on 4 workers, okay, and the experience API at 3 workers. So you can, instead of putting that in the global variables, you can put it here, okay. So according to your need and according to your organization understanding, you can do that, okay. Now next, let's move to the pipeline script, BitBucket pipeline.yaml. So if we see the pipeline script, can you open that once? Okay. So here, if you see, here what we are writing, the format of writing is different. So similarly, if you will be going to the AWS, and this will keep on changing, but the understanding will remain the same. So let's try to have the understanding here. So we have the different steps here, just like we used to have the stages over there. We have the steps here. And at the first step, what are we doing? We are writing the script in the line number 10 that I want to scan the whole code if it is a complete Git code or not. In the second code, in the second step, I'm gonna validate and compile my code. Okay. So in the line number 16, you can see the command maven command I am using. The next is the 24 line, which I am using this step to deploy our application. Now the things comes how it going to deploy. It will be asking for the credentials and how to read that. We have done that stuff, right? Creating the variables, but how to load that thing into the pipeline and how to tell which one to read, because we can have different type of variables as I showed you over there. So what I'm telling that in the line number 21, the deployment, right? So in the deployment, we went in the repository setting. I'm going to tell that please take these local variables for this particular pipeline, and the workspace variable will be available by default. So this is the pipeline. Now let's move to the demonstration of the BitBucket. I'm going to show you a real life example. If you see in the pipeline, what happens actually, whenever you trigger anything, it by default, what it does, it reads the bitbucket.pipeline.yaml file from your code and runs the code whenever there is any commit you make in the code. Let's make a slight code change in our project and let's see if the pipeline gets triggered on its own or not. Let's move to the source main, Mule. Yeah, here I'm going to make a slight change in my payload in the logger, line number 13. Right now it was, this is the demo payload. I'm going to make a change. Demo meter, payload meter. Now, the moment you commit it, just the moment you commit it, you go to the pipeline and see a new pipeline must have started. See, a few seconds ago, it got started. And it's gonna do all the steps which I have explained in the BitBucket. If you have various other steps which you want to validate before deploying to the application, you can do that. This is irrespective of your need. Okay, let's suppose I want to log something or I want to run a before that. This is completely your requirement. You can do all the things through the pipeline. Okay, so this is gonna run and it will take some time, and finally it will be getting deployed to your Anyone Studio. So the first step is done, second is in process. It has started the compiling part because this is the script which wrote there. And once it's done with the compilation, it is giving a green mark and it is going to move to the deployment. The command has started, the deploy, mule deploy. You can move to the runtime manager. I guess you will be seeing something get started over there. Just refresh it. Okay, it's gonna start in some time. Some issue just came. Can you zoom in a bit? Okay, some issue might be changed on the runtime. But the thing is, it will be get deployed. We have deployed it before as well. Maybe the thing also came with a BitBucket that it just gives you 10 trials. Okay, so it got deployed, and you can see in the runtime manager as well. It will be getting deployed. Okay, now over to you, Pankaj.
Yeah. Thank you, Mitali. Thank you, Menk and Rohit, for the nice demonstration, and thank you, audience, as well, for the like nice questions. And meetup engaged and interactive. Okay, so Amit, I think you are going to present the Kahoot one, right? Kahoot quiz.
Yes, Pankaj.
Okay.
So
So
thanks everyone. Thanks Mayank, Mitali, and Rohit for such wonderful presentation. And for audience, thank you for being such a wonderful audience. That session was really interactive. So before actually we go and present the Kahoot, is if anyone have any questions or anything related to Mills we have just seen, please feel free to ask. We'll give it, I think, 5 minutes, and then we'll start with the Kahoot quiz. Is that fine, Pankaj?
yes, and a couple of things as well before like audience will start leaving also from after Kahoot. So guys, like we are also planning the next meetup might be like endpoint partner manager. Okay, and we are also looking for the new speakers from this group. Okay, so if you want to participate in the presented topic, so please feel free to reach out to us, Amit and me. Okay, so you in this like a meetup presentation as well.
Yeah. Is there anyone in the group who don't know how to use Kahoot, or anyone who is new to this group?
And Amit also like I would like to say like whosoever will be the winner for the Kahoot quiz. Okay, so they need to reach out to us so that we don't miss their credential to like share the Mulesoft voucher and everything, the link that we can share with them. So they need to reach out to us so that we can share the Mulesoft forms with them. They can fill the real details for the trainings and certifications.
Yep. So yeah, there is one question from Ashish says that in Jenkins files, how to link settings.xml in that. I think Rohit or Mitali, anyone can answer this.
Okay, so for the Jenkins, the one I showed you, the config file provider plugin, there's a way you can add your settings.xml over there, and you can read it in each of the pipeline.
Okay, I think this was answered earlier as well, but Ashish, hope that is clear to you. Like whenever you are using config file provider, there are various options, so you can use settings file there.
Yes, we can load our settings.xml over there, and we can just use the same term, that is config file provider thing, and load our settings.xml into the pipeline while running that.
Yeah, thanks, Mitali.
Ash,